This is like paradise on earth. Why do they need to kill dolphins and whales? Then you go and you see what you see today, and then you see even worse when you see the Grind.
It's a difficult thing to see when you're not used to it. They're really running for their lives, being driven to their death on the sand.
It was horrendous. I've never seen such brutality in my life.
I'm Steph Spiro, the Daily Express's environment editor, and this is the Faroe Islands. Embedded in this remote archipelago's history is a practice that has withstood the tides of time. I'm talking about the Grindadrap, or the Grind. Hundreds of pilot whales are driven into shallow bays like the one behind me, where they are beached, killed, and slaughtered for food every year. This one is where 78 pilot whales were butchered whilst British tourists watched on from a cruise ship nearby. The cluster of rugged isles 200 miles north of Scotland has a storied history with whaling. The practice dates back more than 1,200 years, but has come under increased scrutiny since the 1980s as the world shone a spotlight on environmental concerns. It seems this age-old tradition is at a crossroads, so join me as we navigate the tumultuous waters of whaling in the Faroe Islands. Nestled in the heart of the North Atlantic is the Faroe Islands, an archipelago of rugged beauty. It is a place where tradition and nature collide in a way that has stirred both admiration and controversy. For centuries, the Faroese have relied on the ocean for sustenance, but today, the hunting of pilot whales, known as the Grindadráp, has become a global symbol of debate, raising questions about tradition and sustainability. For the Faroese, the pilot whale is not just a creature of the sea. It is a symbol of survival, community, and cultural identity.
We base our whole existence and also our modernization as a welfare society and as a part of the world on the sustainable use of living resource of the sea. The Grind whale, the pilot whale, has been part of that for more than 1,000 years. We have statistics going 450 years back, where we can prove that we have never taken more than approximately 1% of the whole population of the Grind stock in the North Atlantic.
Despite the claims of a responsible practice and a sustainable approach, the brutality of the Grind remains a point of controversy for the island. Just before my trip, a hunt took place on these very shores. Tens of pilot whales were driven to the beach by boats as locals slaughtered them one by one.
It's a difficult thing to see when you're not used to it. The fear and the panic is really palpable. You can feel it and sense it as they're coming in. They're what we would call running for their lives, and they are an entire community, their family, their parents and siblings and cousins and you know what we would think of as our neighbors, and everyone in a whole community being driven to their death on the sand. It's a really dramatic thing to witness when they've had the spinal cord cut. Blood gushes out like a fountain, and then when the back of the neck is cut, the rest of the blood is just coming out into the water. By the end of this, when you have tens, if not hundreds of animals on a beach like this, the water is deep red, so for quite a ways out into the water. So they're lying in the blood of their family members and community members as they are waiting themselves to be killed. At the end of it, they're all dead together, and the sight is quite difficult to see.
Whaler Jens Mortam Rasmussen invited us into his home, where he said pilot whales are still an important and sustainable food source for the island.
What we call the Grind is the whole thing from they've been found to they're sheared out. And in the middle there's somewhere something gets killed. But after the killing, they're on the beach, but then they will be dragged out again and normally they will put on a concrete harbor, spread out and where we butcher them, and then they get sheared. When we changed the method that we killed, people were saying, "Oh, now we are getting it. Now the killing is more humane." But I will never go that far to say any killing is humane of any creature, and I don't even kill a fly myself if I'm not eating it. So the killing that you see on the beach is a killing for food. It is nothing else. It's nothing that we feel, oh, this is a cute animal or something like that. This is food, and this is a killing that we feel is necessary for getting us some food. So it's not an emotional thing for us. And I really understand people that say, this looks terrible. And looking at picture, it looks terrible. You would not like to see any animal suffer, but if you want meat, something has to suffer and something has to die.
His 22-year-old son, Sonna, joined the conversation to explore the future of the tradition on the island.
Hey, Sonna.
Hey.
Would you follow me in my footsteps as a Grindman?
I think as soon as I have time, I would see myself getting the license.
The pair discussed how riled up young men now fearlessly defend the once dying practice after foreign activists attempted to stop the Grind by disrupting the hunts.
A lot of the organizations try to take pride in the fact that they are supporting the fact that it's close to an end, and that only makes us more sturdy and more less likely to end it, because we want it to be our decision. I think these Goliaths trying to stop us, that they have organizations and countries and groups that are 20 times our size, that the fact that they're bigger than us should make them decide what we do. It has never worked that way. If something in one country should change, it's the people that protest against it, and not the outside forces that protest against it. So if we decide to stop, we should stop. It's not because any other group or organization wants us to stop.
Marine conservationist and Sea Shepherd volunteer Sydney Haugen said the Grind was historically more of a necessity for providing food than it is today. But he shares his concerns that some of the meat the pilot whales provide go to waste and are disposed of by being dumped back into the ocean.
Now we see a lot more waste as well, and we see shares of meat that aren't collected at all. And then those shares, along with the carcasses, which aren't used for anything, are thrown back into the sea, either by being pulled by a little boat or by being dumped off a cliff by a truck. It's still this symbol of how unnecessary this tradition is. We see the carcasses fall a couple dozen meters into the water. It creates a huge splash. A large booming sound can be heard. And the water just turns a piercing red color, similar to what you will see at the actual gill itself.
On the blustery island, we meet Dr. Paul Vey, Chief Physician at the Department of Occupational Medicine and Public Health in the Faroes. He has overseen the examinations of over 3,000 islanders for his research studies and has made important public health recommendations to reduce the consumption of whale meat and blubber. Dr. Paul has spent decades warning the island's population about high levels of pollutants like mercuries, PCBs, and PFCs from the world's oceans that end up in sea mammals like whales and dolphins.
A reduction of the consumption has happened the last at least 20 years, because in 97 we came out with a recommendation to the women of the Faroes, especially the young women intending to become pregnant one day, not to eat the blubber or the meat in order to not to be exposed to mercury. The most young women I talk to, they tell me they don't eat it at all. On the other hand, elderly men, they still do, but I consider it a victory that the women, the coming mothers, have followed our advice, because the main issue has actually been to protect the fetuses, because they are considered to be more vulnerable than adults.
We did not see a hunt during our time on the island, but we received a tip-off that another activity was taking place nearby. We were alerted to the tagging of Atlantic white-sided dolphins, where trackers were drilled into their fins to record scientific data. Right, so we've just received a text from a contact on the island who says that a pod has been spotted in Grindadráp, and the plan is to tag them. So it doesn't sound like it's going to be a hunt. It's going to be a marking. So thankfully we're in the car already. We're going to hop there right now. It should be about half an hour. Let's go. During the journey, I was apprehensive of what was to come. The calm, scenic landscape offered a contrast to the hive of activity and distress that awaited me at the bay. The bay is just ahead of us. It looks really busy. We've just seen, I think, around 5 boats, probably drive a pod of around 15 into the bay. So we are about to arrive any time now. It looks like there's quite a crowd of people there. A mix of... it looks like some luminescent researchers, maybe. But yeah, let's stop over. In front of us now, we are seeing around 5 boats, speedboats, various sizes, surrounding a pod of what looks like might be 15 white-sided dolphins. They are being driven into the bay here in Grindadráp, as it looks like the seamen bang against their boats. The dolphins certainly look like they're in distress. They're discombobulated. They seem to be all swimming in various directions, and it's very unlike how you picture dolphins swimming breezily in the open sea. They look very confused, certainly, I think, very distressed. It looks like they're coming closer towards shore now. The pod is kind of separated, and it looks like the researchers have waded in with their tall wellies and their luminescent gear. Some of the pod is beached towards the shore. Others have gone towards a rocky surface just to the other side. And it looks like now they are approaching the dolphins with their bare hands as well. So let's see what happens next. Researchers held down 2 dolphins with their tails, straddling them at times in a bid to control their flapping bodies. The team then moved in to place the trackers on their dorsal fins. The drilling began as bright blood stained the clear water surrounding them. The scientists with the Faroese Marine Research Institute, FAMRI, kept repeating, "Block the cameras," in an attempt to mask the procedure. This is Grindadráp Bay, about 30 minutes outside of the Faroe Islands capital of Tórshavn. It has been the scene of a blood-filled and rather distressing tagging of white-sided dolphins. A pod of around 15 of the mammals were driven into the bay. It was rather distressing to see the pod separated, splashed around, all moved and swam in different directions. Some headed towards the shore where they beached, others headed for some rocks. Researchers dressed in luminescent gear then pounced on the animals, some even straddling them at some point, and that is when the drilling began. About an 8-inch drill just pierced through their fins, and it looked like possibly even their body at some points, to form a triangular design for a tracking device. The drilling was obviously distressing to the animals, who at one point had their eyes wide open and then were shut in pain as onlookers watched on. At one point, volunteers were called for to go and help the rest of the pod that had beached and try to send them back to shore. It was quite miraculous to see how the family remained in sight as they watched on as two of their members, their community members, were being drilled into. At one point as well, it seems that they shoved or rammed some form of electronic pill into the dolphin's stomach. We understand that was to monitor the temperature of the stomach, which might have something to do with alerting officials to the dolphin's eating patterns. When the practice was over, after about 45 minutes, and the sea had turned a piercing red colour, the dolphins were then guided back towards the open water, where they reunited with the rest of the pod and slowly made their way back to sea.
What would people say if they were here today after what we've just seen? We saw a Grind a few days ago. It was horrendous. I've never seen such brutality in my life. We've been around abattoirs, but this was just brutal. These animals can't speak for themselves. You saw today that this pod waited till the tagging had finished, and then they left the harbour. Instead of just disappearing, they waited for their family. And you see people standing there and accepting it and say, "Oh, beautiful dolphins, these are the Faroese themselves." So they appreciate the beauty that we've got around them. I mean, this is like paradise on earth. Then you go and you see what we've seen today, and then you see even worse when you see the Grind.
The research institute conducting the tagging says that the purpose of FAMRI is to make studies of the Faroese marine environment and its living resources, and to inform and advise the Faroese authorities and public about these conditions. They claim the studies are necessary for sustainable exploitation. During our time on the Faroe Islands, we heard the testimonies of the brutality of the Grindadrap, whilst witnessing firsthand the distressing nature of dolphin tagging. The Grindadrap, a centuries-old practice, stands at a crossroads. As the world watches, the Faroese people must navigate the delicate balance between preserving their cultural heritage and addressing the concerns of a changing world.